There's a river in the green field of mine. Sometimes it's black, sometimes it's white, like the cloudy mountains. Some days the grass is blooming, some days it turns to dust. I'm a tree longing for the sun, hoping that it lasts. There's a river in the green field of mine.
Ψυχική υγεία. Το SNF Nostos 2023 έρχεται να αναλύσει
Mental health SNF Nostos 2023 has come to explain every aspect of it on the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd June. Dialogue and entertainment become one. Corroborating that taking care of ourselves inside starts out there somewhere. SNF Nostos 2023 of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. Release, rethink, refocus on mental health.
Hello everyone. Before we start, I would kindly like to ask you to please download the SNF Nostos app by scanning the QR code on the screen. There. So, you've likely heard that familiar saying about how cell phones, social media were initially created to connect us to those who are far away, but it's ironically now disconnecting us from those right beside us. So as we navigate this digital era, there's a growing conversation around the role technology plays when it comes to mental health. Yet, many of us believe that the actual key to mental health lies within human interaction or connection. So all of this begs to the question whether or not technology can be a useful tool or resource when it comes to mental health. So to delve into this thought-provoking question, we have our upcoming speaker, Selina De Sola. She's the co-founder and president of Glasswing International. So please, let's welcome her on stage.
Hello. Okay, are we good? Hi. So I told ChatGPT, I typed it in, I had never used it, and I said I'm lonely, and this is what I got. Right, so if you can, I know the letters are tiny, but basically it told me that I should go connect with people. The science tells us that we're hardwired to connect to other people. To survive, we had to stick together, right, over millions of years. And we also know that safe and caring relationships are really important and foundational to achieve all kinds of different outcomes in education, in health overall, and also in economic opportunities and others. So, you know, they also reduce anxiety, they reduce stress, they mitigate depression, they help us heal and build resilience. But in so many communities, these social connections that protect us and that nurture us are torn. I'm from El Salvador, and many of you may be surprised to hear this, but Latin America is home to only 8% of the world's population, but over 1/3 of its homicides. So you can imagine the impact that this has on individuals and on communities and countries, especially because we know that when you're exposed to violence, this can lead to trauma. And when that happens, our brain's stress response shuts down core functions like problem solving, critical thinking, and emotional regulation. And it elevates the ones that we need to protect ourselves and survive, the fight, flight, or freeze, so to speak. So this can make it hard to learn, it can make it hard to make decisions, to build relationships. It can also make it hard to connect with people, to trust people, and to ask for help. So what can we do about equitable access to mental health care that we're here to talk about in contexts where social connections are diminished and where access to mental health specialists is really scarce. Well, we can actually build on existing resources in communities that are already there to build caring networks of trauma-informed support that consist of people that we can train and we can equip them with mental health knowledge and skills. In fact, at Glasswing, we've been training tens of thousands of existing government employees, so teachers, nurses, doctors, police officers, child protection workers. We've been training them so they can provide this kind of support, right, on trauma, but also on self-care, because you can't pour from an empty cup. So we're trying to build this whole core of lay mental health workers who are already serving on the front lines and can step in and buffer the impacts of stress and trauma on themselves and also on the people they care for. So it's a human-centered approach, right, that builds ecosystems, trauma-informed ecosystems, and they're webs. That's why I have this picture here. They're webs of caring social connections that make you feel supported, but also of referral systems, so we can access more specialized mental health professionals when we need to. And that way, in the most remote communities where there isn't access to technology, we can still have access to mental health support. I want to share one of so many examples of how this web comes alive and how it expands. So we met Camila about 10 years ago. She was 13 and she was already drinking hard alcohol every day because she was trying to cope with the adversity she was experiencing in her house. So she had dropped out of school. She was in situations that were really risky, and it got to a point where she had to leave and move to another community. She ended up in a school where we had already trained the teachers, right? They were trauma-informed. They had learned about trauma. They had learned about how to provide care and support to students. They identified that Camila, at 13, right, she was isolated, she was withdrawn, and she wasn't integrating well. So they supported her. They helped explain to her and give her information on what may be happening and perhaps why she sometimes feels the way she does, and provided her also with opportunities to connect to peers and to other caring adults. And it worked. She actually grew into becoming a student volunteer and getting really involved in school. She finished high school and she went to college, first person in her family, and we hired her. So she's been working for us now. A few months ago, we were talking, and she said that just in the last couple months that she had been working there, 2 different students had approached her. She said she was the only person that they felt they could talk to, and both of them separately were feeling like they didn't want to live anymore, right? Something we're seeing a lot with adolescents globally. One of them had attempted suicide. Now, we had already trained Carmen, and Carmen knew how to intervene, but also knew when she needed to refer. So she referred these 2 kids for additional support. And these 2 kids, had they not had someone in the school who was trained, but who they trusted, they probably wouldn't have had access to the kind of care they needed at that moment, which potentially could be saving lives, right? So Carmen, at the end, became the person that she had needed when she was 13 to someone else and to other teenagers. So like the teachers that supported her, she became part of that web of support, of protection, of care. There is no doubt at all that tech can help build and expand trauma-informed ecosystems. They can amplify access to information, to psychoeducation training. They can also be that first point of contact for people who may be online but socially isolated, not comfortable reaching out to someone. And they can also be technology can also be really helpful in collecting and analyzing data so we can understand what we're facing as a community of practice. But it's really the artificial intelligence, and even what I showed you initially about ChatGPT, it's hard to imagine that AI can actually replace the care and the support of human being on that other side that is so foundational to healing. It's not, I guess, when I was thinking about this question, I'm like, it's not so much a question of whether or not to use technology in mental health. It's a question of how to use technology in a way that is safe and effective across geographies, across populations, across cultures, taking into account confidentiality and safeguarding. You know, we still live in a world where there are a lot of people without access to connectivity, without access to technology. So almost everybody does have access to another person that can learn and become a mental health support for them in some way. Because at the end of the day, we really are each other's most valuable resource. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now I'd like to present this exciting panel that is coming up now to talk to us about the bioethics of digital mental health. Enjoy. Thank you.
Kalispera. Hello. Thank you for joining us for this session on bioethics and digital mental health. Can chatbots and telehealth safely improve access to care? I'm Jeremy Sugarman. I'm a professor of bioethics and medicine at the Johns Hopkins Berman Institute of Bioethics. I'm joined with Effie Viena. She's a professor of bioethics at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology Zurich, better known as TH. And Dr. Fred Munch, clinical psychologist, senior advisor, and former president and CEO of the Partnership to End Addiction. Before we get going, please take out your apps. If you haven't done so already, open up the app and you'll see in this session a set of polls. There are 3 questions we'd like you to answer so we can assess what's going on. So please, if you haven't done so already, take a minute to do that and we'll be with you in just a minute. I know some people are still answering your polls. We're going to see what's going on with the results of the first question. So the first question was, how familiar are you with the availability and use of digital mental health services? About 28% very familiar. 26% neutral, 28% not very familiar, and not familiar at all. Well, you're in the right place. Now notice the little bit of difficulty you had using your phone at the beginning. That's a transition. But now you want to get care for mental health problems. Is that going to work? It might. It might be really useful. Let's go to the second question. Would you trust using artificial intelligence to give you a mental health diagnosis? 26% yes, 74% no. And the next one, would you trust using artificial intelligence for your mental health treatment? 26% yes, 74% no. We've got some things to talk about. We just heard Selena give us a great talk with the hope of technology. She told you technology is part of mental health care today. Let's turn first to Fred to think about what really is being done now in terms of these virtual or digital methods of providing mental health care.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. I think, we tend to go, when we think about technology and mental health, we tend to go, is it an app? Is it a wearable? Is it a VR headset? Is it a bot, interactive? And if we think of what's out there, it's almost unlimited in terms of what we can do, but clearly we're not accessing it. And part of that is because it's not in our lives. And so when we think about our technology, it's in our lives in terms of mental health. It's in our lives in other ways. So when we think about mental health, we want to think about what's the goal, what is the technology that we're going to use, and what's the underlying algorithm. And then you can sort of dive in to think about it. So if we think about mental health, we think about engagement, we think about assessing and diagnosing, we think about supporting and connecting people. And in terms of engagement, when we think of technology, we want to go ubiquitous. So the ubiquitous apps that are out there are SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. All of these tools are accessible to more people in the world than anything else. They're accessible in remote populations. You don't need a smartphone except for some of the WhatsApp. But SMS is available to everyone. You can add a bot into SMS, so you can create a whole program. That's the underlying algorithm or technology. And if you want a closed group, you can do something else. In terms of assessment, there are tons of things. Right now, Meta, Facebook, is assessing everything you're doing, right? So in terms of these algorithms, they're assessing everything. We did a study called the Digital Marshmallow Test in assessment, and we used the marketing literature to create our hypotheses, and we found that the more someone touches their screen, the more likely they're to engage in sensation seeking and impulsivity, and it was better than the most reliable psychiatric measures of sensation seeking. So it's all there. We're assessing our everyday. So there's apps that can assess your vocal prosody, your steps, all of this, which are directly related to mental health. And then in terms of support, well, when we think of support, there's so many ways we'll want to be supported, and that can be through chat, that can be through a bot, that can be through telehealth. And typically the way I like to think about it, so if we're creating a framework, is to think about the underlying mechanisms of support. So is it synchronous or asynchronous? Right now I have a quick question, and is it automated or is it human? How many people filled out the survey because of the push notification? That you got a push notification in your app and then you filled out the survey? How many filled it out because of Jeremy, who's saying it? Okay. So what we see is right now, in terms of this audience, what you're doing is you're filling it out because you trust him, he asked you to do it. But some people filled it out because of the bot, right? Because there was a push notification. So how do we use them together? It's called supportive accountability. Is something episodic? Is it continuous? Do we want to keep it? Is it an immersive experience like a VR headset, which are available, but they're expensive? So we want to understand what's our goal, who we're pushing it out to. And then with regard to mental health, the last thing I'll say is when we think about technology and mental health support is we really want to understand anonymity versus something being identifiable. And people disclose way more to digital systems than they disclose to humans. So it opens the door to the conversation. I actually think the reduction in stigma around mental health is due to the mechanism of people reporting and feeling more comfortable reporting to digital systems, and then that created a feedback loop to reduce stigma. So understanding the goals of what we're doing is incredibly important.
So great. So Fred outlined a few different kinds of tools and different modalities that could be used to provide mental health services. But Effie, what are the ethical issues this might raise?
Thank you, Jeremy. There are many different approaches we have in digital mental health, and I think actually all those do raise ethical questions, and they raise different kinds of questions. So is it a push notification that you're getting in an SMS? Is it a chatbot you're interacting with? Is it a telemedicine/digital health version of your treatment? All of those would raise different types of ethical questions, but I think all of them raise just there's some that they have in common across the board. And I think the first one is the question of whether these technologies, whatever they are, whether they're safe and whether they're effective. That's something that in health and in medicine, we look out for in whatever intervention you're making, whether that's diagnostic, for example, is it an accurate diagnosis, or if it's treatment, are we sure that this treatment is safe and effective for people? And I think here, Fred, maybe I'm not sure that we have the full picture with all of these different kinds of technologies that we put out for people to have access to. So that's one big across the board, and of course different types of technologies would vary in degree in terms of how safe or effective they are. And I think we can talk about it later more. The other big question is the question of privacy and confidentiality. And you did mention that actually people are more willing to share when they don't have somebody in front of them and they have to talk about how they feel or what they suffer from. And we're seeing that in studies, which is promising in some ways. On the other hand, and we also see that people, of course, engage with digital technologies, with apps of all kinds. We've been talking about the privacy paradox, that people put all their information somewhere and at the same time they're worried about their privacy. But I think when it comes to health, in general, and mental health in particular, how safe the informational privacy of people is going to be, it's very, very important. Whether people themselves care about that or not. And again, we have a whole range of ways to go about it, but we do also have a few studies that show that digital mental health apps in particular, not all kinds of technologies, have been actually not very strong in protecting people's privacy. And so I worry about that particular issue. On the one hand, you don't have somebody that you, across from you, another human, so you feel more comfortable. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that you don't care about your privacy. So that's the bucket I think we have to be very careful with. And the third big ethical question for me is who has access to these technologies? Again, because they can scale so quickly and globally, the potential for increasing access is huge. But in that potential, we shouldn't forget the digital divide, the fact that not everybody has the same kind of savviness when it comes to digital or access to digital technologies as we maybe in certain rooms think that people have. So 3 big buckets, but we can get to more.
All right, great. So Effie wants to know, does it work? Will it hurt you somewhere in terms of privacy, and can people get it? Those are really crucial questions. And so Fred, can you, Selena outlined at the beginning, there's a huge need for mental health services. Not everybody can access a therapist, not everyone can access the kind of care they need. There are different situations around the globe where access is desperately needed. What do you think? Is it possible to scale these things, as Effie mentioned? And if so, how, and what would that look like?
Yeah, so I think in terms of access, there's not really a race, quite frankly, in terms of we need technology to help people access care. You know, earlier we heard 30% of people referred to mental health treatment go to treatment. We have a mental health crisis, and yes, we need to train community members, but we also need to know the vulnerable state that people are in when they seek care or when they're trying to think about care. And so in terms of access, the easiest way is to think of what is the most common communication mechanisms that people use and then use them. Right now, technology is the world's outreach worker. It is the one thing. When I was an outreach worker, I would hand out condoms where young people, sex workers, were working. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't wait for them to come to me. So I think in terms of access, we should start there. But if we end there and think that technology is going to be the thing that connects people and they don't need connection, that's where we're making a lot of our mistakes, which is to think technology is a panacea. It's just a tool in our toolbox. And I also think, I do want to mention one thing about the literature on efficacy of technology-based mental health interventions is quite strong. And the literature also comparing it to in-person interventions is quite strong. We just finished a study where we found we can reduce drinking by half with an interactive text messaging intervention for people who want to reduce their drinking, which is almost as good as in person. So what we're seeing is this growth in this literature. And one of the things we found there was that people actually said, I got connected to meetings in my neighborhood because you gave me all those resources I need. So it wasn't really the text messages, it was just a medium to get, and a means to get to the end.
So Effie, what do you think of all this? She gave you some FSC data. He's coming back to you. He's doing a Serena Williams, right? So back across the court.
I love it. I think, the more of this, we've been calling for this kind of studies to be out there. And anytime we see one, we're very, very happy because by we, I mean, I guess everybody. We want something that works. And we're in a space, mental health apps in particular. I mean, there are different things we're talking about here, but we know that digital health apps, they operate in a kind of interesting space. They're not medical devices, the things we really scrutinize before we put in the market. They're not things that you just, buy at the supermarket and nobody checks on, or well, you don't check so much on. They're somewhere you think they might be doing something. They're in the wellness, health kind of spectrum. So I think many of those have been missing that important part of efficacy. And so I'm very happy that we have it, and I'd love to see more. And since we are at that one, I think the safety part is also important for me. Now, those of us working in the sort of digital health space, they've been talking of these two types of safety. Physical safety, does the app work to make you better, to have an impact? The other is the informational safety. Is your privacy protected? And I think there it would be great if we're seeing more evidence. So not separate the two as two different things. The data protection people worry about this and the medics work about that. We have to be worried about both all the time. And not worried in the sense like I'm anxious, but in the sense that this is the kind of information, this is the kind of evidence we want to collect, and we want to put out there to people in a way they understand it, so we don't have the answers to the other questions. It's like, no, I'm not going to use it because I don't know what's going on. So I'm very happy to see more efficacy.
And in terms of privacy, yeah, we're screwed. Just really, no, really, it's not good.
Not yet.
Yeah. Just right now, we need more regulation. There's not enough regulation. We know that people are sharing data, even companies are sharing data to get more ad revenue, to figure it out. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Okay. You said you were worried. I was going to see if I could get an app for you.
Yes, but I did qualify that. I said I'm not anxious, right? Just a little bit. I was still in the sort of space that it's okay, no app yet.
All right, great. Well, we want to hear from some of you what your questions might be. So we can start we have our youth ambassador here who's going to start off with a question. Should we? Okay. We'll take them from here then. So there was a hand that went up over here. We're going to need the microphone over.
There's one.
And there was another one on.
In the back.
In the back, okay.
And in the front.
So we'll start
Great.
here. Oh, there. Okay. So she's bringing a mic. So after she's going to start, then we'll go to you, and then we'll go over there.
Okay, just a reminder that you can also send your questions through our app, but I'll take the chance to ask the first question myself. So today's conversations are more and more thematic and less human, which is actually one of the reasons people start feeling lonely and seeking psychological intervention. So my question here is, how can we manage to take these technological measures as an opportunity for connection rather than another form of disconnection with humanity?
Okay, great question. And so I'm going to give you an example from my personal practice. I also work as a physician. And I know that people that come to see me, almost every one of them has consulted someone else before they come see me, Dr. Google, right? So it's impossible to practice medicine today, and including healthcare, without knowing that someone has a frame of what they've learned from Dr. Google. Sometimes you're relieved. More likely than that, you realize that tiny little dot on your hand is cancer and you're worried about it. Your headache's a brain tumor. The worst things happen by the time you come in, and so you're positioned in some way. What you can do in that situation is recognize that people are using technologies to differing degrees depending on their age group, their familiarity, their comfort with those levels, and then ask them what they think they already have and what resources they've already tapped, so you can actually build a connection faster rather than something to be fought away. So that's one way to make the connection even more human. So starting technically and going back to the old-fashioned way. Do either of you want to come in on that?
Yeah, quickly to say that, that's a very serious question, I think, and a serious concern. Again, I'm not anxious, just concerned. And one way to do that is to design technology being mindful of that risk. I mean, it's very important to think, how do we design a good piece of technology? Is that one of our considerations, or is it just the technology is flashy, it's fantastic, it looks great? could it have that kind of effect on people? And the other, I think, way to kind of safeguard that a bit is the extent to which those kinds of technologies are integrated into our broader concepts and institutions of healthcare. Are they just out there for people and nobody is helping them out to navigate them? Or are they, integrated into how do we approach mental health systemically?
Great. And there was also, the recent reports of ChatGPT and other forms of technologies making more empathic statements than physicians. I mean, it's a little humbling after all those years of practicing medicine that you can type something in that makes a better statement. But in fact, those studies are coming out. So there are ways of building that humanity. Why don't we go, there was a question over here, and then we have, the mic's already distributed, so I'm going to try as fast as I can. So we're going to go there, and then there, and then there.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Dr. Vallena, she talked about privacy and the protection of data and who has access to data. I would like to ask you about what do you think about the ownership of the data? Who should have the ownership? And Dr. Munt, you talked about extra regulation. Healthcare is already an over-regulated environment, and for this reason is a very slow adopter of innovation. So when you talk about more regulation,
ευρύτερο ρυθμιστικό πλαίσιο. Για τι κανόνες ακριβώς μιλάμε? Λοιπόν, δύο σπουδαία ερωτήματα. Λοιπόν, χρειαζόμαστε μια ολόκληρη συνεδρία για να απαντήσουμε, λέει η κυρία Βαγενά, ιδιαίτερα σε ό,τι αφορά την κυριότητα, την ιδιοκτησία των δεδομένων. Αυτό το δύσκολο ερώτημα προσπαθούμε να το προσεγγίσουμε όχι επί τη βάση της κυριότητας, αλλά του ελέγχου των δεδομένων. Άρα ελέγχεις τα δεδομένα τα οποία συλλέγονται μέσω μιας εφαρμογής.
We've taken our methodology and we've adapted it for mental health. The program is called Mind Skills. Just to give you an idea of what this program is like. Remember, I talked earlier about my friends.
Used by them, with whom that company who has access is going to share and with whom maybe it shouldn't share. A longer answer I have for later, though.
I completely agree that give the control entirely to the end user, to the patient, and regulations need to be set in place so applications have to do that and they're not allowed to sell that data. I think that's crucial, and it's not a long, terms and conditions, but that it's very, very clear. And, I also think that our system of mental health is broken.
Μας είναι κατακαιρματισμένο τώρα. Δεν φτάνουμε ενεργητικά τους ανθρώπους. Από τον Φρόιντ στο ChatGPT, μερικοί άνθρωποι πιστεύουν ακόμη στις φροηδικές θεωρίες και έχουν διαψευστεί. Δεν υπάρχει τεκμηρίωση. Είναι φιλοσοφία. Άρα, το πώς το σκεφτόμαστε εμείς αυτό σε συνάρτηση με το πώς προχωράμε προς τα μπροστά για
offering people the control of their data, not only what they're doing, but how they want to be treated, I think is important.
Okay, great. So just a matter of organization. First, Fred, philosophy is the queen of the sciences. We're with us. You're hurting us. But what I wanted to say, if you could please go to your app again and answer those questions while we go forward. And in the interest of increasing access to people who can't be in the room, Camilla's got the ability to look and see what's being generated for the people who are joining us online. So she's going to take over because she's got the cool tool and I don't. And so she'll answer some questions and then we'll come back.
Okay. Okay, thank you. One of the questions we have on the app is how can we establish therapeutic relationship if people are trained not to share with humans?
For the doctor.
Yeah, Fred.
So how can we, I'm sorry, how? Okay, so we did another study where we looked at the therapeutic alliance scale with humans and digital, and other people have done this study at Stanford, across the board. And people develop relationships with artificial intelligence. They develop the movie Her, right? They develop relationships. And the therapeutic alliance with systems is just as high as with humans. Now, that's not saying that one can replace the other. It's just that if we think of an integrated model with both, we shouldn't discount. Jeremy mentioned a huge study where they looked at empathy from a physician versus empathy from AI. It wasn't even a race. If you look at that data, if that was a drug, it would be $1 billion company overnight. So just being mindful of we can establish therapeutic relationships. The key is make sure we trust the system and that we don't fall into the trap, as everyone's saying, that this is the end. It's a means to an end, a means to connection.
Great.
Okay, so I have another question here that says, in Greece, but I'd like to take it like worldwide to many other places, but in Greece, it is already a privilege to have access to mental health care. Oh, I'm sorry, the app just closed. I'm sorry, a second, please. So I think we can take another question from the audience while it loads. I don't know, I've been logged out.
There's a mic in here, so go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I'm wondering how we can empower individuals to critically assess the safety, efficacy, and privacy issues related to using technology.
Great. So Fred, why don't you take that, given your work in
Sure.
this area?
There are app rating systems, and for mental health, for example, Stephen Schuler out of UC Davis, I believe, no, or Irvine, has a rating system that they've developed. There's others called Mind Tools as well, which I've helped consult with, which is both looking at the safety and whether it's using an empirically supported treatment, but also whether it's engaging to the user and how often people stay with the system. So they're out there, there's more of them. Also being careful that, you know, the first one that started closed because it didn't disclose all of the privacy concerns. So one of the things we're in our infancy. We think it's ubiquitous and it's around, but we're really just getting started. So, but I do recommend going to these different sites online.
I think we can take another question from the audience, please, if anyone else has one.
Some in the back?
Yes, thank you very much. Over here. So, my concern is about the word safety. Are we considering that safety against humans, or we are talking about the level that we need to be concerned about the safety regards AI? Because now, like Dr. Freud said, data-wise, we are screwed. Like every company have our data, we should not be concerned about that. But we should be concerned about the use of it, what they can do with it.
Okay, I'm going to say that I don't feel that we're doomed. I'm not so fatalistic. And I don't think that we should not continue caring about things. We can undo things that we don't like the way they were done. I think that has happened many times in the past. So I still feel that we have ways to protect our privacy and to protect our data. It's going to be different ways than the ones we knew before. So if you're with me, we're still having ways and we still have to care about it. I think in terms of safety, so that takes care of the privacy question, but I think in terms of safety, what at least I meant is that if we put out a technology that we think it's going to have a certain effect on people, that it's going to have that effect on people and not something else that we don't want to be there. So, the undesirable effect, that it leads people to the outcome that we told them are going to reach when we propose the tool, which I'm borrowing from the same thing that we're doing in the rest of healthcare and medicine. And so the question I guess we're asking is, are we comparing this with how well a treatment that a human is offering is going to be? And with humans, we do have a range of outcomes that we have, but we consider them safe in terms of fixed sort of treatments or approaches. So that's how I would think about safety, but maybe Fred thinks, I don't know if you think in a different way about that.
Same way. It's the same as you would approach a therapist. I've been to many therapists in my life. Some are good, some are bad. Same thing in terms of with apps and doing this.
So great. So if you could just finish answering that poll one more time. We just want to make sure we get as many responses as we can.
I think we have time for this question. I started reading before. I'm sorry for that. So the question says, in Greece, it is already a privilege to have access to mental health care. If we create AI tools that vulnerable and underprivileged groups cannot access, are not we just creating another barrier to healthcare, to mental health care?
Yeah, I guess that's again a really important topic and question, and this has to do, at least in my view, with what we understand as access to digital. We do tend to think, perhaps everybody in this room, because we're on our phones, that everybody is online and everybody knows how to use technology and everybody is comfortable with using technology or can pay for a variety of apps or services or data or subscriptions. And I think that's something that hopefully it will be what's happening. But in many countries, and I think including in Greece as well, we cannot say with certainty that this is the case, that everybody has this kind of technology. So again, when we're designing tools, number one, but also when we're deploying tools, I think this is an important consideration. How do we address everybody, including those we know statistically from our statistics that they do not have this kind of access to digital technologies?
All right, great. Well, that sort of wraps up our question and answer
Yeah,
section.
that's all for the questions.
We're good?
Thank you.
Excellent. So let's pull up the results of that poll and see how people are thinking. Let's pull up the poll. Oh, here we go. Okay. So the question again, the question should have looked familiar. Would you trust using artificial intelligence to give you a mental health diagnosis? 60% no now, but 71% at the beginning. So a change of about 10% of people are actually more willing to use AI to get a mental health diagnosis. Let's see what
Jeremy,
happens.
can I jump in quick? Just one quick second, if that's okay.
Just don't jump off the stage.
Yeah. I actually didn't give my pitch for diagnosis. I didn't even talk enough about it. It is better for diagnosis. I just want to throw it out there. The whole goal of technology is pattern recognition. And if we look at the opportunity to merge subjective and objective data together to build patterns to understand mental health diagnoses, this is where technology thrives. It doesn't do as well with treatment, quite frankly. And the other is, I think like radiology, where it's technology-based diagnosis and then you have someone confirm or deny it and do a little more, I think that's where we'll end up being. But it's the one thing I'm evangelical about, and I probably should have said this before.
Well, all right, let's go to the next question. And would you trust AI for your mental health treatment? At the beginning, 74% were no, and now it's only 60% no. So you're still seeing similar patterns, but changes in the magnitude, which is kind of interesting. Well, like every good therapist says, our session's up. So, because we couldn't answer all the questions, what we decided to do was ask ChatGPT the question of this panel. And we're going to type that in now. And let's see what ChatGPT says. And I'm going to give you a little warning. There's a lot of it. You're left to read it on your own. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So before we start with the next panel, we would like to share with you the results of our collective mood check. So if we could please see them on screen. So as we can see here, 44% checked happy, 18% checked stressed, 13% overwhelmed, and 25% excited. And maybe this will be food for thought for our next speaker. Okay. So the rise in mental health challenges is pushing us to find new ways to help and to develop fresh approaches and alternatives for treatment. That's why our next speaker, Professor Fiorenzo Menetto, is here. He has a cutting-edge idea he'd like to share with us, so let's please welcome him on stage.
Thank you very much. Welcome. So I'm going to be a little bit provocative here because you've heard a lot of things about the importance of agency, of personalization, AI, etc. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit of what could happen if you had different types of information. And I come from the lab that I direct is a lab that is a biomaterials laboratory. We care about the materials that come from nature, and we reimagine these materials for use in advanced technology, material science, global health, etc. And that's not the point of my talk. You've just seen that we are in a connected world. We are full of wearable devices. This is not a wearable device, but that sense your body's health. But what about wearables that actually respond to your mind? And so this is the provocation. What if you could have a shirt that senses stress? What if you could have a skin patch for anxiety? What if you had, a band that foresees a panic attack? What if you had a headband that read depression? What if you had something that helped nonverbal people communicate? And so you had a garment that added this dimension. So what would you do with that, and is it useful, and does it give you something else? So our goal really is to advance these types of scenarios and try to think of how technology can affect variables that are very, very hard to detect today. Simple, practical, personal. These sensors don't exist today, and the goal really is to get these sensors into the hands of everybody and to give everybody agency, to bring personalization to these devices. So what does that have to do with Silk Lab and materials? So one humbling thing from nature is nature has a lot of solutions for materials. This is really our playground of the materials that nature uses to build. The lab is called Silk Lab. What is surprising about silk, and why am I telling you about silk? We don't use silk as a textile. We don't use silk as a textile at all. We break it down, we break fabric down, and we turn it into a liquid. And then we use the liquid as our starting material. So we use the liquid to put the proteins that the worm uses to make the fiber that you see here. We use this liquid to put silk back together and build things, build silk things, build many things. And so why do we do this? What is surprising about using this material? It's water-based, it's sustainable, it's edible, it's implantable without causing inflammatory responses, it's resorbable, you can program its degradation, and it's bioactive without refrigeration. What does that mean? You literally imagine this liquid, it's water and a protein, so water and a Lego brick of protein, and then you add biology and you form materials, so you build things with it. And the biology is stable, and that allows you to do a lot of things that are very relevant to what I'm about to tell you. So this is what is, there's a lot of stories around here. This is the stuff that we build that I'm not going to talk about today. But it's at many, many scales. There are the really, really tiny things like nanoparticles, and then the really, really big things like this is Laia, and this is something that is printed out of silk. So there's a lot of stuff I can tell you. Then if you are interested in any of these boxes, I'm here. I'm happy to tell you stories about them. But what does that have to do with your mind? So the biological preservation means that we can take this liquid and turn it into an ink that you can print in an inkjet printer, an ordinary inkjet printer. You can screen print it, you can do whatever. So this is one of the examples where you take something from nature, so an antibody, and you can stabilize the antibody inside the ink. So your inkjet printer now prints a biological reporter. So if you print it on a lab glove like this, if you print the word contaminated on the lab glove, then, and you touch a surface that is contaminated with bacteria, that word turns from blue to red. So that's nice. Maybe. And one thing that connects us to here is that now you can make these things of arbitrary dimension. This was done pre-COVID in 2019. These are tapestries that are all sensitive and responsive, and that were hung right across the square right there. And the things that you can do is you can start doing these types of shirts, very, very simple shirts that detect changes of temperature and changes of pH. But there are so many glands in your body that you're painting a picture of yourself. You're painting your picture of your reaction, and you're painting something that you can pick up with all the phones that are in this room. And if I pick the colors right, your phone is going to be able to tell you how much lactate there is in your sweat, how much have you exercised, and so on and so forth. So, this gets very, very intricate because you can choose the colors and you can choose the variables and you can make like these very psychedelic shirts that maybe belong more on the dance floor than in a medical diagnostic. And so these are the little patches, if you remember, so I'm old, if you remember the game Mastermind, you're playing Mastermind with biological colors. So they're patches that are readable by your phone, etc. Wow. We like this work, but how do you go from wow to something that is meaningful, right? Because a lot of the things that happen in a laboratory in a university are not necessarily the technology that you're going to use tomorrow. So we're very interested in these things. Technically speaking, you need to be sensitive and you need to be specific. You have to have the right molecules that you put inside these things, otherwise they're useless. I can claim to first order that glove that I showed you before is useful only in very, very specific scenarios. And so this is where we work with the University of Washington with David Baker, Institute of Protein Design, that designs proteins that don't exist in nature. And then we take these proteins, and these proteins are designed to respond to a very specific virus, toxin, or whatever. And we mix them with silk. We use the stabilizing properties of our liquid silk, and we make chemically responsive materials. So we go through this chain. We basically are making a cocktail of silk plus molecule. Then we end up in formats that are very interesting. So we've demonstrated that we can sense COVID, like the test that you take at home, by printing these inks onto the surface of a mask or on the gloves, that we can sense botulin, we can sense hepatitis B, etc. The thing that I think is very important is that you can start doing unusual things like this. Your sensors become very, very bizarre. So you buy a drone and you make a sponge that now you can fly around this room for half an hour, you land it, and then you analyze the drone because that protein is in the body of the drone, and you can figure out whether COVID is in the air. Wow. Well, so what does that have to do with mental health? Hormones are important. So among these proteins that we were able to sense human estrogen receptor 2, which is one of the 3 hormones that are responsible for breast cancer. So the thing that is very interesting here is that now you can imagine a sensing bra that gives you an early warning sign of breast cancer through and eliminates, for example, nipple biopsies. Clinical testing, long way to go, again, from wow to action. On the mental health side, if you can sense sensors and if you can build these proteins, now you have access to a set of variables in a lot of the biofluids, so sweat, saliva, blood, and urine. You have access to variables that are not monitored, physiologically impaired to, for example, your web search activity, the physiological measurements that come from your Apple Watch and so forth. So having these types of powers in your inks and in your inkjet printer opens up a chapter that I think is very exciting, and then might give more personalization, more agency to the individual to start on their own before overcoming that barrier and starting to talk about these things. And it's going to take a village. This is not a simple thing to do. You've heard about everything, including ethical issues, including adoption, including who owns the data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So bringing these things back to the individual is something that is very important to us, but these are our people. So there's people that have scaled up silk for us so that we use silk to cover food and preserve food in stores. And again, if you want to know about it, we'll talk about it later, but we shape these molecules into multiple forms, as I've shown you. We work alongside experts of depression clinical and research programs that have multiple clinics, from depression clinics, suicide clinics, ketamine clinics, postpartum depression clinics, et cetera, which is a very important link to make. And then we work with the people that design the proteins and scale them up. And we need this room, we need people. And because the village does need to grow. And we need to do this in a mindful, ethical, and meaningful way, as I'm sure you've heard many times before. With that, I thank you. And I want to show you, before I go, the result of an analog poll. So those tapestries were responsive tapestries that responded to the public here. So this is what the tapestries look like after interacting with people. So instead of maybe those 4 metrics that you saw today, maybe you just look at colors and you can see how you feel. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm Beatrice Arquette, and I am a member of the Youth Advisory Committee. And so I just have a few quick reminders before we jump into the next session. Remember to keep your phones on mute, and also note that we will be using the app as well for the Q&A portion of this session. So drop your questions on there. So now, what if we could see each other's silent struggles, especially those of young cancer patients? Often, we focus on their physical health, but what about their mental well-being? Marie Barnett, a psychologist from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, will guide us through this important topic. She'll explore how these young people can understand and manage their emotions during these challenging times. Let's welcome her to the stage.
Hi. What a gift to be here together today. Okay, so if I could, thank you. So I'm going to talk about something everyone here has heard of, but really very few know and understand. It starts big and broad, and it's known across the globe. It does not discriminate by age, gender, race, ethnicity, or even lifestyle choices. And it's possible it can touch anyone at any time. Cancer. Those words, you have cancer. It also strikes me that all of us were or are children, adolescents, or young adults. I invite you to think with me about what I say today and how it might be connected to you or someone you know. Examined next to each other, cancer diseases among adolescents and young adults are one of the most serious health problems in the world. And as we know, mental health is a global public health issue that we all know and care about here. But with our, now imagine them together. Childhood cancers are rare. Cancers among adolescents and young adults, which I'll also refer to as AYAs for those aged 15 to 39, occur 6 times that of childhood cancers. Both are seen as unique, underserved age groups. With incredible treatments and growing access to clinical trials, funding, and creative medical solutions for both proactive and reactive medical care, survival rates from these cancers has only been rising. Representations of child and AYA cancer have also only increased in the media. These experiences and the impact of living with and beyond a cancer diagnosis are invisible and often unnoticed by the community and world around us. This includes family, friends, classmates, employers, teachers, neighbors. As a clinical psychologist at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City, I have the privilege to care for this incredible age group going through cancer treatment. It is a beautifully hard job. Developmentally, these individuals go through stages marked by rapid changes in cognitive and emotional growth. And these issues need to be addressed when considering medical and mental health treatments. AYAs in particular have to cope with cancer treatment while attaining key developmental milestones. These include autonomy, identity development, and initiating intimate relationships and establishing self-esteem and confidence. They may be making decisions about their career, about education, about starting a family, employment. That's a lot, and it's all invisible. Cancer is a gravity-shifting event. With the many things taken away, lost, or rendered seemingly impossible from cancer treatment, as a child or AYA in particular, or for their caregiver, one of them is often mental well-being. The addition of a physical illness comes with the addition of mental illness. The definition of a traumatic event itself includes cancer as an example. A traumatic event itself is linked with increased anxiety and mood-related disorders. Additionally, adjustment disorders are a valid and appropriate diagnosis for experiences that quite literally need adjustment to. That's important. Cancer-related issues can result in significant emotional distress and psychiatric symptoms, depending on age and type of treatment, like radiation or chemotherapies. A life-saving treatment may leave you with significant cognitive and developmental deficits. Psychological distress, such as anxiety, depression, or social isolation, are significantly greater among AYAs compared with older adults with cancer, and higher reported rates of psychotropic medications suggest increased emotional burden. During my first encounter with a patient and their family, I feel obligated to normalize that it would be weird or not so human if you were not sad, anxious, confused, or any combination. As a psychologist, I strongly believe in championing mental wellness within cancer care as striving towards the ability to be inclusive of all emotional states. They are all true. Sadness, joy, confusion, acceptance, loss, peace, and the whole child, their internal and external world. The invisible and psychological aspects of cancer can be much greater and more nuanced for children and AYAs because it is such a developmentally intricate period. Focusing on AYAs in particular, how can we better understand living with and beyond a cancer diagnosis? How do we see what is invisible? I'm a kid, I'm only 15, I just turned 21. It is in conflict because a healthy young person should not get cancer. How can somebody be healthy last week and today starting chemotherapy? Now, I know people are all full of contradictions, especially kids and young adults. But I observed cancer to create a unique type of dialectic, internally, both during and after treatment. Cancer itself puts this age group into a web of inherently dialectic ways of living and experiencing the world. And it travels through time, into survivorship or caregiver grief, through space and within relationships. Much of my work in therapy is to help put words to the dialectics of experiences, while at the same time understanding those normal experiences and challenges of being young. Over years spent individually with patients and caregivers talking about the lived experience with cancer, mental wellness is often tethered to this concept of dialectics, which is particularly poignant with cancer. A dialectic is when two seemingly conflicting things are true at the same time. At the heart of a dialectic is the idea that things are made up of opposites, and change is possible with a dialogue between opposing ends. This interconnection of things and the idea that opposites can be integrated are important elements of thinking therapeutically about dialectics, and they are invisible. In this image, perhaps you see a young woman or an older woman, but it is both. If we learn the power of and, the way we see things, think about them, and feel may change. The power of and. The ability to hold dissonant things in mind is a marker of maturity, development, and cognitive ability. This psychological flexibility is a driving force behind emotional regulation and adjustment. It is hard to do. When diagnosed with cancer, an individual and caregivers are forced into chaos, and without a chance to practice or get used to or ease into the experience of holding new conflicting things at once. Cancer treatment requires consent or assent to treatments and medications that often add symptoms that you didn't have before. reduce quality of life, and leave long-term side effects and physical consequences. And as many patients say, cancer meds kill you before they save you. A dialectic. Treatment is like a dialectic equation, adding, subtracting, multiplying, added medical appointments, added side effects, missed days of school and work, missed exams, missed paychecks, lost fertility or mobility, added scars. Your hair is taken away and replaced by a wig. As scans are a common part of treatment, navigating scan results is another dialectic I hear so often. Being relieved that your scans are clean, yes, and also sad and anxious that they're still part of your life and you still have to deal with what they mean. Many have shared with me that they feel so much worse when everyone around them is so glad that their scans are clean. It's great job, you're so strong, that's amazing, you can move on now. But when only one side is acknowledged, it negates the other. So if you think about dialectics, when only one side of a dialectic is acknowledged, greater emotional distress and difficulty coping may be exacerbated. Both patients and caregivers alike sort of describe wanting people to understand what they go through and also saying, no, I don't ever want anybody to understand or to go through this. Social and identity development are impacted. A common theme described to me as being the same person but interacting with the world differently. Once a teenager described to me of not wanting to do chemo. She just relapsed. She knew what cancer treatment was like and made a decision she did not want to do it. She wanted to keep her hair and attend prom in a few weeks, with the consequence of letting her cancer kill her. But she viewed this as valuing life and wanting to live fully. She did not want to die. She wanted to live fully with her social identity and her hair. You are faced with mortality when life is just beginning. It is not uncommon to think about not living or even suicide. When living with treatment, side effects are so intense, you've lost so much control, and life is so disrupted. Again, a dialectic. You are fighting for your life, but don't want to live this way. Giving space to talk about mortality can alleviate pressure and allow feeling more present and grateful for living in this moment. Talking about a negative, allowing a positive. It's also an invisible dialectic. It's a balance. I often describe parallel lines when describing, providing a visual for a dialectic. On one line, it's both true that you fear uncertainty in the future and unknowns, and on the other line, make plans, talk to friends, live life, start a family. They can both be true at the same time. Another invisible aspect of life impacted by cancer is when treatment ends, survivorship. When you faced cancer treatment, when you face mortality, life after treatment can make it hard to differentiate what other experiences are hard or easy. Coming off treatment can be both joyful and scary. Scary about the unknowns of the future, not seeing your doctors all the time, or the excitement of going back to what we say, quote, a new normal. With this in mind, distress with the transition off treatment may include invalidating other challenging things that really are hard. How can anything else be hard after cancer treatment? But both things can be true. Cancer treatment is hard, and development is hard. You can think about these cancer experiences along a continuum. Time and time again, I hear that things don't just end with cancer, it just changes. Not allowing this new normal to be acknowledged can increase anxiety or distress. Survivors can be both moving on and still impacted. If they are grappling with it, so should we. A way to move forward and foster mental wellness is to allow a dialogue of the dialectics. Let them live together. Give both a space to process and be true. Can caregivers in our community also normalize this? To not allow a numbing of an experience at the expense of being only positive or negative, stable or unstable. Resilience may grow with the tolerance of both and. Dialectics are a good way to validate yourself while still pushing for change, for acceptance. I often hear this skewed view of acceptance. So many people tell me this. It's like an assumption that accepting something means it's okay and I like it and I'm happy. That's not necessarily true. Accepting parts of life that are hard and hurt, like cancer, is challenging. It's difficult to face that phrase, it is what it is, good and bad. But this can also open the door for then making a choice aligned with your values, goals, and identity. Now I turn to you and us as a collective. Mental health services should be prioritized in all cancer centers as a standard to be proactive and normalize emotional challenges and dialectics that we expect and are appropriate. How can we, a family, friend, community, and world, how can we listen, receive, and react to these invisibilities? Perhaps even champion the invisible. Sometimes sitting with a dialectic and acceptance, even of a bad thing, can give you the freedom to move forward or to find a different solution. And sometimes it's just an opportunity to sit in an uncomfortable moment and learn to tolerate it. And what I believe is experience another way of seeing, empathizing, and being alive. We might consider grace with the imagery and language around cancer survivors being strong, survivors, brave. This might negate that it's not necessarily true. This might make them feel like they have to be strong and put a front that's not entirely genuine. And again, both may be true. We can support this unique age group by helping them talk about dialectics and build a tolerance to listening to their experiences, living with uncertainty and loss of control. Building this tolerance for the unknowns may be its own way of knowing, an own form of knowing. We can cultivate empathy and greater capacity for bearing witness to individuals' cancer experience during a complex developmental time. Our responses can be part of healing, resilience, and emotional well-being. It's hard, and it's so simple. Listen to them. Listen for the dialectics, acknowledge it, and stay present with both sides. The runway of cancer is long, especially when you're still young and you're still growing and learning about yourself and the world. These individuals are forced to live with visible and invisible impacts of cancer. Let us be part of the solution that fosters mental health, wellness, and the holding of and. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie, for such a powerful talk. So we'll start off the Q&A session, and I'll start off with my own question.
Sure.
So, what telltale signs indicating that these young people living with cancer are struggling with their mental health can caregivers or family and friends look out for?
It's a wonderful question and also individualized. I'm actually going to flip that a little bit and aligned with what I've said that I often say to patients, you can't control other people, you can only control yourself. So when thinking about red flags and dialecticism, I think if you're a caregiver or a friend or someone say, well, what are my own red flags? Have I only been thinking about the positives? Have I only been saying, you're so great, you're so great, you're so great? And then maybe you want to give an opportunity to talk about some other aspect. And the younger a person is, the more they need modeling and examples of how to do that or how to express feelings. Many caregivers will say, well, they're not talking about sad things or being anxious. And I said, well, have you asked or talked about it yourself? They don't have the words yet to do that. Many families have worry jars in their house, and it doesn't mean you have to talk about it, but you have to give it space to exist and give it a chance.
All right, thank you so much. So I'll take a question from the audience if we have anything. Any questions? All right, it appears that we don't have any questions as of yet, but if you do, Marie will be around and very willing to answer any questions. So now I'll just, say thank you so much, Marie. You did amazing.
Thank you.
All right, so everyone, thank you so much for your time. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back at 4:10.
Sound check 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Sound check 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay. Sound check 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sound check. This is the English channel, channel 1, the English channel. Sound check 1, 2, 3. Δοκιμή, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Κανάλι 1 για τα αγγλικά. Κανάλι 1 για τα αγγλικά, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sound check 1, 2, 3. Channel 1 for English. Μίλα και εσύ τώρα.
Ακούγεται και από τα δύο. 1, 2, 3. Τσεκ. 1, 2, 3, τεστ. Κανάλι αγγλικών. 1, 2, 3, τεστ. Θα στο ανοιχτό και αυτό, γιατί θέλω να τα ακούνε και τα δύο από ό,τι κατάλαβα. Πιάνει τον ήχο και από τα δύο. Κανάλι αγγλικών έχει μείνει ανοιχτό.
Τώρα είμαστε εδώ, συμπτώματα νέας εποχής. Νομίζω πως ναι. Κάτσε, γράφει ΕΒΕ. Να είστε καλά.
All right, so just at the booth, we're joined by Alison. Yes, Alison Omoni.
Omoni, yeah.
Yes. Oh,
It's
tell
Alison
us.
Omoni.
You got it. So, yeah, hello, Alison. And I mean, it's been a hectic day. I don't know. Do you mind giving us your mood out of 10?
I would say 9.
A fair 9.
All right.
It will probably be 10 after we see the president.
That's what everybody's looking
course.
looking forward to. But to just touch base on, I believe, well, we did have a chat earlier on, and I must say it's really lovely to know that you came all the way, and you've been telling us about all of the experiences of other countries that you went to. What's your link to mental health?
Okay, so I'm very happy to be here. I am a student mental health nurse at the prestigious University of York in England. So I've come to represent my university, and I am also in association with the Office of Philanthropic Partnerships Alumni. So I'm a mental health advocate. I'm also a student leader with the Council of Deans of Health in the UK. And I'm also a student social prescribing champion. So I've come to listen in and learn a few more things about what's happening globally to ameliorate the mental health challenges that we face, because mental health is one of the world's most pressing challenges.
True. And you're very passionate about it, right?
Absolutely.
Can you maybe tell us of a time when your mental health, if you're comfortable, tell us of a time where you had to deal or face, if you have some sort of mental health challenges or relations with any close friend, maybe?
Sure. I think that so previously I was a dental care professional, so I've had to I left that career so I could pursue mental health. So I went from dental to mental. It's a bit of my tag. Because there were so many things that have happened, family and personal and everything like that. But I believe that as a lady coming from the BAME background, that's Black, Asian, minority ethnicities, it's a little bit trying to spread awareness and advocate for mental health, let people, destigmatize and demystify the myths around mental health. So basically, that's why I joined. Me personally, the challenges of going to university as a mother, as a wife, as a mature student, having to navigate, because I go to clinical placements and I deal with, really hard, difficult situations on placements. So the way I let out is I use my husband as a venting point.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
he's just there.
Yes, he is. He's
moral
here with me.
support.
And my children as well. I think about why I started, why I'm doing it for them. And I also think about all the lives that I'll possibly touch and the people that I'll see. I just want people to feel that they're in a safe space, that they can talk about their mental health without any stigmas.
Can I just say, you said you went from dental to mental, right? And dental care is notoriously often excluded from healthcare in general. I find myself that mental health care is often not talked about as much as the rest of healthcare. So what do you think about that? How do you think that both of these subjects, and especially mental health as it's this conference's main topic, can and should be, if they should be, included in healthcare in general?
I think that it just depends globally where you are. So I feel like in countries such as the UK and the USA, dental care is quite prioritized, and mental health for so long has been a bit pushed under the rug. People don't feel like they're comfortable to talk about how they're feeling because they don't want to be labeled or they don't want to be stigmatized. And so me joining that workforce, because I was in dentistry myself and I specialized in orthodontics, so that's quite like a vanity section. People wanting to get their teeth straightened as well, but then there's also health reasons for wanting to do that. So I just looked at what was going on around me, and then I decided to make that change myself, and I thought if it's not too popularized, then why not let me take the step?
Do you have any advices for people who are struggling with their mental health? How can they deal with their mental health issues?
I'm very big on holistic therapeutic aspects of combating mental illnesses, such as primarily anxiety and depression. So talking about things, looking for something that you love doing and maybe focusing on that. So I do sometimes dabble when I'm on placements. I dabble with occupational therapy type of roles. So going out to the garden, taking some of my patients that I work with for daily extracurricular activities, and I find that people release that way and they feel a little bit better. But I'd always encourage you to talk and seek help.
To go to therapy.
Yes. Therapy is so important, particularly for people who are traumatized. People shouldn't be ashamed to seek for help. I'm also suicide awareness trained, so I do ask people questions or talk to people and try to get them to open up a bit more.
And when someone's of a lower income, because often therapy and other mental health services aren't available for free, through the state, wherever you are. How do you suggest people who don't have access to these services, what can they do instead?
So I would encourage, there are sometimes voluntary groups and things. So the UK, for example, I attended a Health Education England conference a few months ago. So the UK has roles whereby the NHS England are implementing things like social prescribing, which is what I'm a student champion of. So those services are they're implemented to assist with the GP, with the general practitioner and the doctors, to just alleviate that pressure so that people are not running straight to the doctor, because it could be that they could join a local group for arts and crafts and music and things like that. And I noticed that we've got the Reflect mural as well, and a few other arts and crafts here, which can also help with people who might have mental health challenges, to focus in on those.
Wrapping it up, do you maybe have any last words that you can say to somebody else that's here? Something that you believe you took away, you taking away from the conference?
Words of encouragement.
Exactly, yeah.
I really just want to advocate for mental health so passionately. My number one thing is for people to feel safe, to feel like they're not alone, that we all have mental health, that the difference is that whether others have more severe issues or more pressing challenges. I also took a lot of encouragement from the plenary sessions. I've been watching them live. I can't wait to attend the one with Goldie Hawn and of course President Barack Obama. Goldie Hawn's going to be talking mainly about the children, how to, raise mentally fit children. And as a mother myself, I'm looking forward to honing in and getting some advice from there as well and learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us our time.
Thank you so much.
Lovely. I must say, with that being said, I do not know if we still need to get somebody else, because I'm looking at
Καλησπέρα. Η επόμενη ομιλήτρια θα
Good afternoon.
εξετάσει ένα
The next
κρίσιμο
speaker
ερώτημα.
will elaborate on a difficult topic. How can we correlate the dysfunctional use of technology and social media with the deterioration of adolescent mental health? The problem becomes ever more topical given the isolation imposed during the times of the pandemic. Let us welcome Anastasia Vlachio-Georgaki, Scientific Manager of the Early Intervention Unit for Problematic Internet Use, Center for the Treatment of Addicted Persons, KETHEA. Good afternoon to one and all. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you the experience I've gained throughout the years vis-à-vis the abuse of social media and internet applications, generally speaking, focusing on the adolescents and young adults that I see in the unit. I'm responsible for the early intervention to treat the problematic use of internet in KETHEA. KETHEA is an organization that focuses on the prevention, early intervention, and treatment of all addictions. However, before I proceed to sharing my experience with you, I'd like to take you back to the distant 1995-1996, whereby Ivan Goldberg and Kimberly Young, for the first time, used the unknown up to that time term, internet dependence. What had they discerned back then? They had seen adult users of the internet, mainly video gamers, who presented features and behaviors similar to those of gambling and substance abuse behaviors. What did they notice? Withdrawal from family and professional life, lack of meaning outside gaming, destruction of family, friend, personal relations, and also symptoms of deprivation, which were manifested by means of anger, violence, anhedonia, lack of pleasure, that is, and depression. The next landmark after 1995 was 2007, when Apple launched for the masses the first iPhone, changing reality in the use of mobile phones, among other things. Top technology companies, together with parents back then, introduced in the daily lives of children and adolescents the amazing world of games and communication applications through the smartphones. We are talking about a true invasion, unbridled, without limits. We would say that since 2007 and up until today, children tend to learn to use smartphones at an earlier age compared to the age of learning to tie their shoestrings. Since that time, we've had hundreds of studies globally carried out in order to trace the repercussions of excessive occupation with platforms of the internet. We see that there's a trend for the reduction of the average age of the persons who make problematic use of the internet. Another common finding, very serious, also related to the topic of our conference: the more time adolescents spend on the internet, the more aggravated their mental health. In fact, recently, perhaps you have heard of it, the chief medical expert of the US, Vivek Murthy, issued an unprecedented healthcare warning related to the risks of social media on children, calling for a thorough and exhaustive study of possible damage that can be done to the mental health of children and adolescents. It appears that globally we're not convinced of the deleterious effects technology can have on children when excessively used, and we need to study it. Before these sweeping changes in the past, adolescents connected physically with their peers. They sought experiences beyond the family environment. They sought to satisfy the need of belonging to a group. And of course, they wanted to create an identity for themselves. These are fundamental steps that adolescents have had to take throughout time. So in the modern world, the seeking of identity is mediated by the internet, among other things. Let me mention a study carried out by Eteron, a Greek survey, in fact. It was published at the end of the year 2022. 51.6% of young people pertaining to Generation Z, meaning those born in the time span of 1995 and 2010, spend 5 to 10 hours every day using their smartphones, and many of them spend more than 15 hours, 10%. Of course, this doesn't mean that all of those persons make problematic use of the internet, but we have this as an indicator to go by. Since at the distant 2008, another survey had shown that when the use of technology for leisure exceeds 2 hours, there's a risk of abuse and addiction. Therefore, I leave you to your own conclusions. So today, it is a fact that, as it so happens with every era, this era has its features too. So today's adolescents and young adults seek new ways to connect. They try to form new kinds of public spaces, digital neighborhoods. However, what studies have shown over time is that remote contact and limitation of physical social interaction has very serious repercussions indeed. And so, this negative impact on their lives regards the following: sedentary lifestyle, poor diet, deficient sleep, lack of incentives, stress, depression, reactive violence, dependence behaviors, and the most paradoxical thing of all, addiction, and the most paradoxical thing of all, loneliness and emotional detachment, even though they spend hours on end on the internet being connected. Another landmark date, 2020, we have the outbreak of COVID-19, and globally, as well as in Greece, we see the beginning of adoption of measures in order to cope with the pandemic. Children, adolescents, young adults, all of us were called upon to experience something inconceivable, being locked inside the four walls of the home without any contact with others at school or at work, fearing that others and contact with them constitute a risk against our lives and represent possible risk. This was indeed an unmet condition, unprecedented. We had no prior experience to fall back on and cope. Of course, the pandemic acted as a catalyst. The necessary implementation of social distancing, literally or not, legitimized digital socialization for young children and young people. Everything had to do with the screen: education, contact with peers, entertainment. What did the pandemic do? It accelerated processes that went years back, leaving a footprint which is quite intense behind. And the final impact remains to be seen. I don't believe we've seen it. Stress, depression, learning difficulties, ADHD disorder, attention deficit disorder, loneliness and violence among children and adolescents have been intensified, and we are highly concerned about them now at school, in the environment of the family, in society. In fact, in the network that I work for, the colleagues involved in prevention have and maintain great contact with schools and the educational community, and they convey ever more messages related to issues they see emerging in schools. As I said to you, perhaps I didn't say it as a speaker, during the pandemic we had a major increase of claims and petitions on the part of parents and adolescents to cope with issues of internet addiction. So there was a big increase there. So, summarizing, I'd like to speak to you about Jason and Helen. On the faces of these young people, I can see all the adolescents, boys and girls that visited our unit seeking help, and of course their parents who, being quite frequently desperate, scared, ill at ease, and exhausted many a time, had a certain attitude themselves. So Jason, 15-year-old senior high student, came to us a year ago. He's been living with his mum. The father lives in a different neighborhood. The parents had a conflictual marriage, a bad marriage, and an even worse divorce. In the midst of the pandemic, the mum worked remotely from home, being an employee of a company. It was difficult for her to cope with that situation, in fact. And there were many, many conflicts between them, mainly because Jason, from a certain point onwards, started letting his studies slide. That is, already starting from the first lockdown, he had stopped attending classes. And when classes resumed with physical presence, he wouldn't go to school. He started showing complete disinterest in his lessons, and so there was great tension between the mum and the son. And in fact, what he said was that he couldn't for the life of him see why his mum put him to so much pressure, given the fact that he was interested in online gaming, and in fact he was dreaming of making money from online gaming. So what prevails in their relation are feelings of loneliness, desperation, helplessness, and lack of prospect. In fact, Jason, describing how he experienced his life throughout that period, he said, "I feel as if I were a strong new car that has no road in front of it to speed. It remains stationary." I ought to admit that throughout the years, I have seldom heard a better description of an adolescent's feelings about the internet. The only attractive, bright way out of an impasse, of a dead end, to a world with better cohesion, a brighter, easier world, the world of monitors and screens. Let's go to Helen. She's 16 years old. She lives with both her parents and an older brother. So in the midst of the pandemic, she actually discovered TikTok and Instagram. Since that time, she's become an expert user. It's the way she mirrors herself to create herself. A self that she finds ugly in appearance, not popular enough, not intelligent enough, not interesting enough. She has constant quarrels with her parents, since she wants to be connected and online all the time because she eagerly waits for the messages from her friends. And of course, she looks forward to seeing the stories uploaded. When parents try to set limits, she reacts violently and angrily, and very often she threatens to fall off the balcony, to throw herself off the balcony. As you understand, this leaves parents ill at ease and scared. The stories of Jason and Helen are but two amongst the hundreds of stories that we've heard throughout the years. Each story has its particularities, but there is a common denominator: tension, emotional detachment, violence, lack of meaning. What we are called upon to do sometimes therapeutically, we therapists, in order to support them, is to encourage adolescents to include new interests in their lives, to enhance their physical contacts, and we encourage parents to reflect on their parental roles, to give it a different meaning, to have a different meaning for their own lives, and to undertake the personal responsibility for the part that they're responsible for. When we as therapists experience our dead ends, some questions emerge, and I would like you to join me in reflecting on that. Sometimes I think, is it enough that is the responsibility of the management of the tool we call the internet? Should it be only the domain of parent responsibility? Isn't this too much of a burden for the shoulders of every family? Is internet addiction only a symptom of dysfunction of different individual families, or is it a symptom of a culture, a lifestyle, and a way of living? Is it correct for us to focus only on persons and families and fail to see the big picture out there? Can we transpose responsibility to the person and the family for such big issues that are social and socially important? Should it be that we, perhaps as organized societies, undertake more responsibility and see to it that decision makers act now, because we see before our very eyes the unraveling of a situation that undermines the mental health and the future of children and young persons? But do we have this vision the targets and the priorities that are necessary as a society? Do we place young people at the center of attention together with the physical and mental health? Or do we have everything on autopilot and we have only profit and competitiveness prevail? Shouldn't we enhance public structures for prevention and early intervention of problems for children and their families, because these structures now are understaffed and underfunded? Internet addiction is a multifactorial phenomenon. It's a dysfunctional way to cope with the pain and to find relief and a way out from a life unlivable, a life incomprehensible, whereby you have lost connection to yourself and to others. This form of dependence or addiction in this time appears to be reaching pandemic dimensions. As Christakis said in his study about childhood and adolescence, we ought to act, and the time is now. Thank you very much.
Furthermore, let me ask the following. I know that there might be questions, but if you agree, I would like to raise a question. Those of you below the age of 30 may laugh with me, but since I am a member of the generation between boomers and Generation X, I'd like to raise the question because the limits and tolerance for certain things is also defined by the setting, the context. So please raise your hands if you agree or disagree. So, since we accept by objective criteria that for the age of 17, that the age of 17 is the appropriate age limit for a driving license, shouldn't we define an age limit also for the free use of smartphones? Yes or no? Yes first. Who votes for yes? Okay, who votes for no? Great, thank you. So probably there are many people here from the boomers and Generation X. Allow me to thank you for your presentation, your speech on such a relevant topic. And since we have already started the process of participating in a discussion altogether, let us go on with questions from the audience. Please raise your hands to get the microphone. We have to be very brief from both sides because we have very limited time. Only 10 to 20 seconds is the overall time. Good afternoon. I'm mother of 2 teenagers. Myself, I've been through the process of embarrassment, not knowing how to handle this increasing use. I see now my son, who is close to himself, is not easily socializing. He shows no interest in life. He is not loyal to some target, some objective, some goal to help him get out of this. So as a mom, I wonder, why don't we have an entity, an agency to take action? Because as you said correctly, the burden is on my shoulders. I have to be the bad one to set limits, to hide his smartphone, to use access codes, and I become the bad mother, while other mothers let the children play without any control. And I appear to be the one who is obsolete. So you put it very nicely, and I wonder, is it possible, is it likely, is it possible rather to establish some controls, not just for the internet, it is also the songs heard and reproduced on the web that insult women's decency, and all those songs are sung by girls. Well, indeed, you are raising many, many different questions. I wish I could answer. definitely, most of the burden is on the shoulders of parents currently. And as parents told me in the group therapy that I had, they said, tell them in that conference that that's an unequal battle. I think it's about time for central political decisions to be made. It's not a matter for one single entity to resolve or specific individuals.
Thank you very much. I'm certain that there are more comments and questions. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for sharing all this with us. So I would like us to applaud the lady. A warm round of applause, please.
Now we're switching to English for the next session. Mental health, when and if we pay attention to it, is usually approached through a strictly biological prism. If one needs special help beyond a counseling or therapy session, they usually consult psychiatrists where they receive medication. In other words, the mental state is strictly medicalized. Our next guest will offer us a slightly different approach. At EPAPSI, the Society for Regional Development and Mental Health, people with severe mental disorders are treated holistically, taking into account not only the biological aspects of the issue in question, but also the social one, the social environment, such as the relationship with family and loved ones. And they seem to be doing so successfully, gaining even the trust of traditional psychiatrists. So please join me welcoming Fotis Vasilopoulos and Dimitris Galanis on stage with a warm applause.
So, hello everybody. My name is Dimitris. This is my colleague Fotis. We are mental health professionals and we work together in EPAPSI for about 10 years now. It's a great honor being here, presenting our work, and we would like to thank Stavros Niarchos Foundation and the organization committee who gave us this opportunity. In this brief presentation, we will show you the implementation of the open dialogue approach from EPAPSI's Day Center Franco Basalia in Athens. And then we will show you a short movie about how we do it. Now, a few words about EPAPSI. EPAPSI is a scientific mental health NGO founded in 1988. EPAPSI is 35 years old. Aims at offering an alternative model of psychosocial care in the community. Currently, EPAPSI operates in Athens, Thessaloniki, Kyklades Islands, and 6 more cities in Greece. All units are staffed by multidisciplinary teams, and they are under clinical supervision. These units are community mental health day centers, mobile mental health units, and residential houses. Also, we operate in a program in partnership with UNHCR about the psychosocial support of refugees in Samos and in Athens. Foti, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dimitri. So, EPAPSI Franco Basalia Day Center is located in the north of Athens and offers holistic mental health services in the community based on the biopsychosocial model. The recovery approach that characterizes the way we work focuses beyond the traditional and paternalistic mental health practices, considering mental health service users as active and equal actors in the design of their care plan. The target population of the intensive home-based treatment team is adults 18 to 65 with severe and persistent mental illness that present multiple psychosocial needs such as poor living conditions and hygiene issues with low or no engagement to mental health and medical services. And most of the population has in his history at least one or more previous hospitalizations. We have started implementing open dialogue approach in EPAPSI Franco Basalia Day Center in 2018. Open dialogue approach was originally developed in Finland by Jaakko Seikkula, the man in the photo. This approach was influenced by systemic therapy and by Mikhail Bakhtin's theory on dialogism. Open dialogue approach is an alternative method for treating psychosis as well as other mental health problems. And open dialogue actually invites all voices to participate in the meeting. Professionals are inviting everyone to talk about their personal point of view. That's why the hidden and forgotten voices are reborn. As Bakhtin says, every voice will appear when there is someone willing to listen to it. Very often, a mental health problem is something more than a psychiatric symptom. It's the top of the iceberg of a deeper relational crisis in the family. Some central ideas of open dialogue approach. The intervention should be done within 48 hours. The person who asks for the meeting is the one who decides who else is going to be invited in the meeting. The family and its members are the experts. It's about their life, and they know better about it. And this point actually poses the following question to professionals: if they can really put aside the knowledge and the expertise, the preconstructed hypothesis. Can they really tolerate uncertainty and the not knowing position? In open dialogue, we talk about openness and transparency, because actually all decisions are made by everyone, in front of everyone, during the meeting. Reality can have multiple aspects. That's why, altogether, with a synthesis of voices, we are trying to co-construct a new common language to overcome the crisis in the family. Since we talked about polyphony, more actors in the game, more ideas on the table. That's why we have close collaboration with social actors like social services, churches, schools, pharmacies, psychiatric clinics, and this photo is a highlight of a training we organized and we delivered to police officers about involuntary admission. We are very proud as EPAPSI to be a member of a national and international network about open dialogue to share common difficulties, experiences, and good practices. And I'm going to actually close this short presentation with Franco Basaglia, the famous Italian psychiatrist that continues to inspire us. And if I can paraphrase a bit his words, it's not enough to have good practices. You have to constantly reflect on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Fodi. And thank you, Fodi. It was very inspiring. I think we all should love open dialogue approach after this presentation. And now we can see the video. Thank you.
Κάλεσαν χθες για ένα περιστατικό, λίγο να το συζητήσουμε για να δούμε πώς θα κινηθούμε άμεσα και ευέλικτα. Κάλεσε ο κύριος Δημήτρης για τη σύζυγό του. Οι πληροφορίες που έχουμε είναι ότι η σύζυγος δεν βγαίνει από το σπίτι, δεν κάνει μπάνιο, καπνίζει όλη μέρα και δεν ενδιαφέρεται για τη φροντίδα των παιδιών. Υπάρχουν δύο που μπορούν να πάνε από την ομάδα.
Ναι, εγώ μπορώ να πάω.
Και εγώ μπορώ.
Σκέφτομαι έτσι να καλέσουμε το δίκτυο που υπάρχει στην οικογένεια, που είναι τα δύο παιδιά από ό,τι καταλαβαίνω, ο σύζυγος. Υπάρχει κάποιος άλλος που θα μπορούσαμε να καλέσουμε.
Πρέπει όμως αυτό και η παρέμβασή μας να γίνει άμεσα.
Οπότε να ρωτήσουμε το ζευγάρι αν υπάρχει κάποιος που εμπιστεύονται, που μπορεί να είναι είτε κάποιος συνάδελφος, είτε κάποιος γείτονας και κάποιος άλλος από την ευρύτερη οικογένεια. Αυτό είναι και μία από τις βασικές αρχές με τις οποίες δουλεύουμε.
Αυτό κάνει ανοιχτός διάλογος, η αλήθεια. Ότι δίνει χώρο σε όλες τις φωνές από το δίκτυο επικοινωνίας να ακουστούν.
Δεν είναι να δούμε έναν άνθρωπο μεμονωμένα, να σταθεροποιηθεί, να πάρει την αγωγή και να κάνουμε μια ψυχοθεραπεία. Οπότε το κάτι παραπάνω είναι να μπορέσουμε να δούμε τους ανθρώπους μέσα στις σχέσεις τους.
Στο να δημιουργήσουν ένα κοινό λόγο πλέον για αυτό το σύμπτωμα που έχει δημιουργηθεί. Που μπορεί να είναι η βία, μπορεί να είναι ψευδαισθήσεις, μπορεί να είναι οτιδήποτε. Απλά το πώς αυτοί οι άνθρωποι μπορούν πλέον να συζητούν για αυτό με ένα άλλο νόημα. Το οποίο φτιάχνεται μέσα από τη συνάντηση. Και γι' αυτό δεν είμαστε ουσιαστικά θεραπευτές μες στη συνάντηση, είμαστε συντονιστές που θα συντονίσουμε το δικό τους λόγο και τη δική τους συνομιλία.
Σκέφτομαι καμιά φορά πόσο δύσκολο είναι αυτό που προσκαλούμε τους ανθρώπους να μιλήσουν για πράγματα τόσο δύσκολα και τόσο που πάνε χρόνια πίσω, ανοιχτά σε όλους.
Μας το έχουμε πει κιόλας, ότι μόνο στις συναντήσεις μας τα έχουμε πει αυτά και μιλάμε με αυτόν τον τρόπο. Δηλαδή υπάρχουν οικογένειες που έχουμε πάει που δεν έχουν κάτσει όλοι μαζί να μπουν σε ένα διάλογο.
Βαρβάρα, σκέφτεσαι κάτι εσύ σε σχέση με με το Σταύρο?
Ναι, σκέφτομαι ότι και για μας ήταν βοηθητικό να είμαστε και η δεύτερη φωνή, ας πούμε, του Σταύρου, αλλά σκέφτομαι πόσο βοηθητικό ήταν και για τους γονείς να καταλάβουν με έναν άλλο τρόπο το Σταύρο.
Γεια σας, καλησπέρα. Τι κάνετε? Πώς έχεις βιώσει αυτόν τον έναν χρόνο περίπου συνεργασίας μας?
Η λέξη μου έρχεται στο μυαλό, έτσι είναι σίγουρα βοήθεια, έχει υπάρξει βοήθεια δηλαδή. Έχω λύσει κάποια θέματα πολύ πιο εύκολα από ό,τι θα τα έλεγα μόνος. Νομίζω ότι έχετε προσπαθήσει να με γνωρίσετε καλά, να γνωρίσετε όσο καλύτερα μπορείτε.
Σε σχέση με τις οικογενειακές συναντήσεις, πώς ήταν για σένα αυτή η εμπειρία?
Ήταν πιο εύκολο στο να σας νιώσω πιο οικία και να ανοιχτώ ουσιαστικά παραπάνω.
Η ματιά που βλέπεις εσύ εκείνους πια έχει αλλάξει?
Νομίζω πως έχω καλύτερη στάση από ό,τι είχα πριν. Θέλω να πω ότι προσπαθώ να πω περισσότερο στη θέση τους και να καταλάβω από τη δικιά τους μεριά πώς βλέπουν κάτι.
Ήταν πολύ καθοριστικό για μας το να βλέπετε κι εσείς, γιατί είχαμε αμφιβολίες σε αυτά που βλέπαμε εμείς. Θέλαμε λοιπόν αυτή τη σιγουριά από ανθρώπους εξειδικευμένους να βλέπουν αυτή την εικόνα και να μπορούν να καταλάβουν τι συμβαίνει, γιατί εμείς εκείνο το διάστημα, εγώ σε εκείνο το διάστημα ήμουνα σε απόγνωση, δεν ήξερα τι συνέβαινε. Δεν υπήρχε άκρη, δεν υπήρχε μέση. Δεν ήξερα τι συνέβαινε και εμένα προσωπικά με ωφέλισε πολύ πολύ περισσότερο το ότι ένας άνθρωπος εξειδικευμένος ήρθε μέσα στο σπίτι μου.
Εξίσου βοηθητικό είναι ότι στο team των ψυχοθεραπευτών και των ψυχολόγων υπάρχει και ψυχίατρος.
Και μόνο το ότι εμφανιστήκατε σε αυτό το χώρο, μέσα στο πρόβλημα, δημιουργήσατε έτσι ένα κλίμα εμπιστοσύνης, να μπορέσουμε μέσα στον ίδιο μας το χώρο να πούμε πράγματα που δεν τα είχαμε πει πριν. Ούτε τα βλέπαμε, ούτε τα ακούγαμε, ούτε τα λέγαμε.
Και το άλλο το μεγάλο το πρόβλημα είναι ότι δεν μπορείς να πεις πουθενά το πρόβλημά σου. Είναι σημαντικό και αυτό. Μας βοηθήσατε πάρα πολύ στο να το ξεπεράσουμε αυτό. Δηλαδή δεν έχω πρόβλημα να πω από ένα σημείο και μετά ότι έχει πρόβλημα το παιδί.
Σκέφτομαι πόσο δύσκολο είναι όταν δεν υπάρχει δίκτυο, όπως τον άνθρωπο που μας έχουν καλέσει για να πάμε τώρα. Που μάλλον, από ό,τι φαίνεται, δεν υπάρχει κάποιος άλλος πέρα από τον ίδιο για να μας βοηθήσει. Και είναι αρκετά πιο δύσκολο νομίζω σε αυτή την περίπτωση, γιατί θα πρέπει εμείς να δημιουργήσουμε το δίκτυο.
Dear all, Fotis Vasilopoulos and Dimitris Galanis will be available for your inquiries and questions in the IMED media area located in the National Opera's lobby. Now, it's time for a short break. We need to clear the room since we're going to follow up with a live broadcast of the discussion between the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, and the SNF co-president, Andreas Drakopoulos. The session will also be broadcasted at the Agora and the Great Lawn. Thank you very much.